Hi, I'm Don Bowman with Agilicus, and today we're going to talk about simplifying security using a technique called zero trust and splitting the identity of the user apart from their authorization. We're going to talk about technologies like OpenID Connect, how you would use this with Office 365, and I'm hoping to convince you this is a better approach than what you may be doing today. So just a little bit of background about Agilicus. We're really passionate about cloud, security, DevOps, and open source. Our mission is to digitally transform IT using modern cloud-native technologies, reducing cost, increasing reliability, and simplifying ease of use, particularly for the end user. So what I'm going to convince you of today, in 2020, I will work on the device of my choice, at the location of my choice, without the VPN and its password, as a first-class citizen, regardless of my employment status. And what I mean by that is the end user of my applications, whether they be my staff or my residents, they want to use the device they want to use where it is. They don't want to have a VPN to connect, and they want it to work the same way everywhere, regardless of whether they're at a desk or at their cottage. And they want it to work the same whether they're employed full-time, a contractor, a temp, a resident, anything. They just want the application to work. So today, I'm going to convince you of something. So this comes from the company name Agilicus. We're all about Agile. And in Agile, one of the main things we do is called a stand-up. And every day for the stand-up, the team is coached to say, today I will. This is focusing on the future. Today I'm going to achieve. So you don't fall into, well, yesterday I did this. It's about what you will get done. So today, I'm going to convince you that identity management is a single system. It's not split across all of your different applications. You have one. The second is that authorization is separate than identity. What this means is, I am Don. What I can do is different. Each system has a different thing that it will authorize me for, but I am still the same person. I'm going to convince you that the VPN is a dead-end technology. In the past, it was something that allowed me to tunnel into the corporate network. It was like landing at my desk. But from a security standpoint, it's awful. It brings everything in. It breaks my home video conferencing because it tunnels it back in the corporation and I can't get to my home printer. But also, I'm now entirely on the corporate network. I have access to everything, and I only wanted one application. It's much more difficult to authorize and secure. So when we adopt zero trust, which is the idea that instead of using a perimeter-based defense like a firewall and a VPN, we switch to the concept of it's the user and the application in a fine-grained sense, and that a concept called Federated Identity, where we allow multiple sources of truth of who the user is. When we adopt these things, we will reach the digitally disconnected worker, people that aren't able to get their job done remotely. We will lower cost. The VPN is expensive. Do you really want to be buying more licenses for it or expanding its size? We will be more efficient. As a user, I'll get my job done with nothing in the way, and we will be more secure. Unfortunately, we're not going to solve some of the other big problems like world hunger, but I think 4 to 5 isn't that bad. So there's always a mandatory did you know stat. Did you know the average person has 90 online accounts? This comes from the password manager companies. Each is a unique identity with usually a unique password, but we all know that person that uses the same password on all sites. But did you know that Wonderwall by Oasis has only 82 words? Yes, the exact song that you always heard that douchebag friend open a guitar and wreck a party with has less words than the number of online accounts. Can you remember all the words to Oasis's Wonderwall? Do you think you can remember all your passwords? So when we're putting a new system online, do we really think that more passwords and more complex passwords and more identities is going to be a good thing for security? So controversial, provoking statement number 1. Every webinar, you've got a set of what ifs. I believe we have digitally underserved team members, temps, contractors that are non-VPN, they don't have a company laptop. Believe it or not, most of the entities that I've talked to, they disagree with this statement up front. Every person who works for me has an account in Active Directory and a desk and a laptop. And then I say, well, what about the junior lifeguard? Well, of course not that person. What about the bus driver? Well, of course not that person. What about the contractor that's there for 4 months doing an assessment of something? Well, of course not them. Underserved team members are unhappy. Every single person is motivated by doing a good job efficiently. So we have to reach these people to get the maximal efficiency and morale out of our organization. Digitally disconnected workers can be reached economically, securely, and simply. There's always an application you need for them, whether it's something with HR, performance management, pay stubs, health and safety training. There's always something that someone you work with needs access to, and that's a digital system. You need their identity, and you need the authorization. You need to get them connected. Controversy-provoking statement number 2. VPNs are insecure. Now, I understand a lot of you are going to disagree with this statement. I bought a fancy VPN. It's got 95 different standards it's got on its data sheet. It's got this type of encryption and that type of password. But the problem is, it's a teleport. You jump me entirely into the organization. I have access to everything. You've brought all the risk from my house into your building. Worse, you're breaking my video conferencing. Everybody's working from home now, and Zoom, Meet, Teams, you name it. When you have a VPN up, it brings the video traffic from my house to the corporation and then back to the internet, which means that the corporation's network now has to have 2x the bandwidth of all of the video traffic of all of the users. We don't want that. So it's breaking them. VPNs are hard to manage on clients. You've all got one person who's got a device that you can't support. It's a tablet, it's a Mac, it's a Chromecast, whatever. You can't reach it, so you can't reach them. You try to tell them they have to work a different way. Back to my original statement, I want to work on the device of my choice at the location of my choice. VPNs are expensive. When you put them in, you thought about, well, I'm going to have 5 licenses for the 5 people in IT, and suddenly it's, well, I need 1,000 licenses for every person in the organization. We didn't budget for that. So what if we could just cancel the future licenses we were going to buy or not have them at all? No end user has ever said, I love my VPN. But they do say, I need access, and we all interpret remote access as the VPN. Foreshadowing music. Or does it mean that? Controversy-provoking statement number 3. You need a new username and a new password for each new application. Now, who's still humming Wonderball from earlier, 82 words in that? Of course you don't need this. People have a singular identity. I am me. I am me in my corporate world. I'm me in my personal world. I'm me on Twitter. I'm me on Reddit. I am still me. Why should we be forced to present different online identities by force? I am me. I present these identities, Don at Gmail, Don at Agilicus. Why not trust these intrinsic identities rather than create new ones? Split authorization out. That's what we own. We've all seen the XKCD comment about, that's a horse battery staple, okay. These passwords are difficult for users to remember. Okay, so now that I've sold you for your staff, what about your residents? Well, of course. Who wants to log into the city library with a new username and password and then log in for recreational activities with a new username and password? Why can't they just use their social credential? Then you don't have password reset flows. It's actually more secure. There's no breaches. We've split identity and authorization apart. Okay, controversy-provoking statements out there. Now let's bake this cake. Let's talk about what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. So what's the objective? The objective is every user sees every application as directly internet connected. They sign in with no new username or password, one click, single sign-on, and they can use two-factor such as biometric or PIN codes, etc., just like they do with Gmail or Netflix or any other modern web application that they securely use today, their bank. Now, what about the ingredients of this? So that's our objective. Well, we need a set of identity providers. The identity provider is responsible for knowing who the user is and being able to authenticate that. In a corporate world, it's very common to use Microsoft's Active Directory, whether you use that through Office 365 or Azure or on-premise with Active Directory Federation. It's not really that important. And the second that are ubiquitously out there are a set of social providers: Google, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Twitch. It turns out that all of these entities implement something called OpenID Connect. It's a standard. Some of them also will implement SAML, which is more of a corporate standard, but they all implement this OpenID Connect. It gives us a way to take an arbitrary application and assert identity against those systems in a safe fashion. But then we need an authorization database so we can do role-based access control. We're not proposing that any person with a Google account have access to every one of my business systems. We're proposing that people we know, they tell us their Google account, we then add it to the trust store in our authorization database, and that's how we reach these less connected workers. We need an identity-aware web application firewall. We now need something to police this, something to ensure that no traffic arrives at my web server unless it's for an authenticated user with a valid role. By doing that, our security goes up dramatically. We're now trusting in zero trust. We don't need a VPN. Instead, we're saying no traffic flows to my web server unless it's for a user I've trusted in a mode I've trusted. So we really need to split number one and number two apart here. It's obvious that Google and Facebook aren't going to allow us to create arbitrary records in their system for our authorization, and I think it should be obvious that they're part of the upstream identity provider story. So we need to federate the identity so we can trust from different sources and then have our own authorization. So I've talked a lot about zero trust here. It's not a term I've made up. It is a standard industry term. It's been standardized through the United States National Institute of Standards and Technology. You can look up 800-207. But in a nutshell, it's a principle that says we're going to move the defense from being perimeter-based, a single strong firewall, to being user and asset-based. This user can use this asset. It's part of a defense in depth strategy, which is, I think, a very good thing, and all of us should be looking at that as a best practice. The VPN says, I trust you, so therefore you're inside the network and everything trusts you. Zero Trust says, I know you, I know the app you're trying to address, I know that you can reach it, therefore I allow it. Zero Trust is fine-grained per user, per app, rather than coarse. And it doesn't break your video conferencing and home printer, because it's not tunneling all of your IP traffic into the VPN. It's taking just one application at a time. Is it convenient? Yes. Is it secure? Yes. Is it simple? Yes. Sign me up. So the simple matter of how and who. So you have Microsoft Office 365 or Active Directory or Azure Active Directory. It exposes OpenID Connect. It's a bit like SAML that you might have wired one application up to before. So you've seen it already. You just configure a new application. Now the user can log in with that original identity with no more password. As far as the disconnected users, we just add them through a social provider, just as a public safety announcement. It's very common to see out there on any website, sign in with Google. And I hear a lot of people saying, well, I would never do that. I think that's insecure. It's actually dramatically more secure for you. You should always use sign in with Google every chance you get and add a second factor authentication to your Google account. It means that your odds of getting breached dramatically are reduced. You don't have a password in all these sites. You don't have to worry about thousands of sites. You just worry about one. So that's my PSA today. So the simple matter of how, we've got to integrate this now. So we've got a couple of choices for how we integrate this. So the first is the application intrinsically has some configuration. So you look in its documentation, look for words like OAuth 2, OpenID Connect, SAML, single sign-on. The second is, maybe if it doesn't, vote with your wallet. In your next RFP, this application needs to support OpenID Connect, SAML, and single sign-on. I don't want another username and password. If it doesn't have it, I'm not buying it. Choice number two is we integrate it. So you say, all right, I got the source code of this application. It's in PHP, it's in Angular or something. I got this, hold my beer. And that's a cow drinking a beer through a straw. There's standard libraries for literally every application language out there. PHP, .NET, Angular, AngularJS. These standards are well established and well implemented. And choice 3 is you put an identity-aware web application firewall in front of it. It's a type of smart reverse proxy. The application has no change. It doesn't really understand users. And this thing guarantees the security just in advance of it. It handles the login, the authorization logic, and it improves the security. So now we've got our objective. We've got the ingredients. It's time to bake this cake and make it happen. So what are we going to do? Well, there's 4 different ways we could deploy. We could keep the application at home in our data center and wire up what's called our DMZ. We can use a identity-aware web application firewall to tunnel it in from a public cloud. That thing in turn has a single connection through our VPN, and then it sort of federates out all of the different applications. We could move the front end of the web application into the public cloud and leave the data store back in the private data center, or we can move the whole thing to the public cloud. So if we have a SaaS application, number 1, the far left column is the right approach for that because we don't own it. It doesn't come to our data center. Number 2, if we don't want to touch the application, if it's something that's just working reliably and we just want to make it more broadly accessible, it's a good option. Number 3 is sometimes what we call move and improve in cloud. And we're making some changes. It makes us more robust for DDoS. It's going to be faster for the end user because it's running out of a much higher performance data center. But it hasn't really changed our backup and data security strategy. We still own all the storage. And number 4 is what's called a lift and shift strategy. We've moved everything into the public cloud and we're way to go. The key here is the user's IP is irrelevant. It's not part of the trust store. They haven't VPN'd in. It's not some source IP based thing. All the connections are HTTPS, they're SSL, they're secure. The identity is upstream verified. The authorization is split out and separate. Any user on any device on any network could make this work and be happy. Back to our original objective. So back to my original statement. I'm going to scratch out the word opportunity and replace it with achievement. And instead of saying I will, I say I can. In 2020, I can work on the device of my choice, at the location of my choice, without the VPN and password, as a first-class citizen, regardless of my employment status. That is the objective. With what I've just shown you, we have achieved the objective. So, today I convinced you, I hope, that identity management is a single system. It's not spread across many different systems with local users and passwords. Authorization is separate than identity. You need to be able to manage that as an organization rather than having it tied into the user's identity, which may be external. The VPN is dead. Stop buying new licenses, return the ones you've got. When we adopt Zero Trust, Federated Identity, we reach that digitally disconnected worker, we lower cost, we're more efficient, and we're more secure. So I may have yada-yada'd over a couple of minor details. Please feel free to reach out to me, just don@agilicus.com. Challenge me. Hey, I think you're wrong. I don't believe that. Can you tell me more? I'd love to chat with you. I've got a lot of videos on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/c/agilicus. I yada-yada'd a bit over multi-factor authentication. It's actually quite simple to add in here, but it's a lot to cover in this webinar. Where'd the VPN go? I replaced it with what's called a workload-aware VPN, so it's system to system rather than user to system, so it's a bit of a cheat, but it achieves the objective. Should I really trust Google and these other social providers? Yes. You're not giving them any access to your network. When you say log in with Google, Google is not not themselves getting access. You are getting access using those credentials. You still own the authorization for the systems we're talking about here. So I think it's a much better trade-off. It's very secure. What about my residents? We still want one sign-on for all services using the identity provider of natural choice? Absolutely. Feel free to talk to me about that, and I can explain how we'd achieve it. So, thanks very much, and hope you enjoyed it. And as always, I'd love to see some comments, questions, concerns. Challenge me via email, comments down below in the YouTube channel. And thanks very much for your time. Bye-bye.